Like for you, it's a dress rehearsal, or for all of us on Earth right now?
At that time, he was meaning it for me and my brother, because he was communicating to us about what was happening to us. I've since found out that 1993 was actually a dress rehearsal for a great many people, but I had no idea at the time. But if you listen to a lot of people, they often mention, oh, this all started in 1993. And I think, wow, that's the same year. So there was something going on in that year. That was dress rehearsal year. But the White Spirit, this entity, was using theatre language in order to communicate with me. So I knew how important a dress rehearsal was. So I took it very, very seriously, and we were going through daily synchronicity, and it was like a mini Ascension experience. But after about 6 months of this amazing time in our lives, things started to kind of go back to normal, what I would now call 3D. And it wasn't long before I forgot about those messages. I stopped believing that something was going to happen, and that this planet was going to change. I never stopped communicating with White Spirit. I would sometimes go long periods without speaking to him when I was going through particularly challenging 3D times, and then I would turn to him, and then the channeling would start again. I did readings for friends. I kept what I did very, very, very quiet. And then that time I was waiting for them. They said, White Spirit said he would let me know when it was showtime. So I was expecting this to be, few months. And as I said, it was 1993. Around the year 2000, I was told that there would be an upgrade with my guidance system. White Spirit was leaving and another guide was stepping in. I was really upset about this, but they explained to me that this was normal and it was to do with my own expansion. And it was the same being, but an upgraded being, therefore a completely different being. So White Spirit left, and this white-winged, very large white-winged entity stepped in, that was incredibly powerful but very loving. And I was aware that White Spirit was kind of still there, but this was something very different. This took a period of a few days. So I'm shutting the door, I'm not speaking to anyone, I'm completely ungrounded with this situation. If a friend called me, I'm like, I can't speak to you right now. You have no idea what's going on with me, and that kind of thing. I was kind of there. But finally this transition took place, and then I'm with this white-winged being. It was incredibly overwhelming. I'm so thankful for the training I had back then, because I did fall apart many times and not deal with it. And of course it was, rehearsal. Now we're in the showtime. I'm not falling apart, and I'm dealing with it because it's even more intense now. This will be the case with anyone who's gone through this awakening period. These individuals that we call starseeds, they will have all been through something quite similar. So after a period of time, I was actually with a friend who was deeply spiritually aware, very esoteric and not New Age at all. In fact, he detested the New Age, to be quite honest with you. He was much more scientific, but very spiritual and esoteric in different ways, and a great teacher for me. And he just said, can you ask your guides something for me? Guides in the plural. I said, what do you mean, guides? I've only got one. And he just looked at me and said, oh, no, they're always a collective. I said, are they? And that stuck in my mind. And then after that conversation, a few days later, this morphing took place. It was like this sort of shadow going on behind this one white-winged being, and then there were loads of them, and I counted, and there were 9 predominant ones. There were other etheric visions, shadows behind them, but there were 9 that were more solid. And I just said, what's your name? And they told me how they couldn't pronounce, I wouldn't be able to pronounce their name. They tried to tell me what it was, and it's just completely unpronounceable, like a sort of a very high-pitched squeak. So, scream. So there's no way I could pronounce it. So I said, well, look, you've got white wings. There's 9 of you. You're a collective consciousness. How about I call you the white-winged collective consciousness of 9? And they were like, yeah, that's fine. I had no idea at that time when I was speaking to them that I would be out there with them, and that I would be, you know, well known. I might have chosen a better name for myself and for them, really. It was not planned in any way, apart from in 1993, I did have a vision of me sitting wearing headphones, talking to people all over the world,
Wow.
predominantly in America. And I was really confused because I thought, well, I didn't even own a pair of headphones. I had some old pair lying around that I used to listen to my record player when I was a kid. That was it. No computer or anything. And I thought, is this some kind of ego in me, thinking I'm going to be speaking to people all over the world? But it was a very, very clear vision, and predominantly in America. So I was speaking to lots and lots of people. I mean, I knew that this was like in the thousands, in the millions. I was a bit sort of scared by that vision, to be honest. And part of me took it seriously and part of me didn't. And of course, that's occurred. I also saw a book as well, but I had no idea what that meant at the time. This again will have happened to the Starseeds, to anyone taking a spiritual path. These things will happen. The way I'm speaking, you know, this isn't a path that's just happened to me. This is a collective path. So, yeah, I called them the White-Winged Collective Consciousness of Nine. Fast forward to 2008, and they're talking to me quite intensely over a period of several weeks. I'd started learning about 2012, and people were saying it was the end of the world. And I was doing some research, and with me, I don't make any commitment about anything until I've actually got to a point where I think, right, all this is adding up. It's obviously correct, and then I have this knowing that this conundrum I'm looking at is correct. So I made this assumption, this opinion that that 2012, the end of the world, was correct. There was no other conclusion I could make given the research I was doing and the information that was coming from the nine. And I remember really believing that you know, the end of the world was coming, and I remember sitting on my bed in a state of absolute horror and shock and depression, looking around at the world. And I remember looking at my little granddaughter and thinking, why this beauty and this creation? Why would they just wipe it all out? And they let me go through this for about 4 days. My partner said to me, I'm really worried about you. You know, you're completely going insane. And I'm like, I know I am. And then when I'm really troubled, the nine, which are all male, will step back, and then one female entity will step forward. I call her the White Goddess because she's purely white. I mean, literally snow white, like snow. And she sat down next to me and she said, it's not going to be like that. Let us show you how it will be. But they allowed me to suffer, if you like, simply because I now know that there were many people, and still are, believing in this end of the world scenario. And I needed to feel what it was like to be that shocked and frightened at the end of the world scenario. I needed to go through that. And so they allowed me to go through this for a period of about 3 or 4 days. I made the conclusion it was correct. I was right. The information was correct, but it was not to be interpreted as end of the world, as in destruction. And then they took me through a series of visions and lots of communication for a long time, showing me what was actually happening. And then one day around the same time, they just said very matter-of-factly in a conversation, do you remember when we told you it was a dress rehearsal? I said, yes, because I didn't expect to hear this again. And they said, well, now it's the show time. I'm like, what? What do you mean right now, like today? And they're saying, yes, not today, this time period. I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do? And they said, well, we need you to tell everyone. I said, tell everyone what? I said, do you mean you want me to tell everyone that I talked to you? And they said, yes. I said, really? Because I've never told anyone except my really close friends. There were even family members that didn't know. Best friends I'd known for years that didn't know. It was a massive secret to me. And I said, who do you want me to tell? And they said everybody. And, you know, I was really overwhelmed, and they pointed to the internet. So that's kind of the story. I then found YouTube. Well, I knew about YouTube, but I found a guy on YouTube, Ricer, who was doing these very weavy sort of beautiful kaleidoscope of weavy colors, and allowing his train of consciousness to just speak from him. And his material was amazing. And I said to my partner, if I did something like that, and this is interesting because I'd been with my partner around 10 years or a little bit less, and I had not channeled in front of him. He knew what I did, but I didn't channel in front of him because it just hadn't happened. We hadn't connected that way. So I said to him, if I bring some of my channeling forward, will you make a video? So it was a massively new thing for him as well, and a little bit concerning, because I was thinking, well, what if I start channeling and he, you know, doesn't like me anymore and he thinks I'm nuts? And of course, he made the videos and I started bringing forward the messages, and that was in 2008. It's now 10 years later, so
Wow.
I've been on,
on
YouTube for 10 years.
And then how did your books fit into that whole thing?
So 2016, I sit down after receiving some information. The nine were communicating to me about Masters of the Matrix, talking about the Masters of the Matrix and explaining to me who the Masters were and what the Matrix was, in response to a series of questions my partner was asking me about soul contracts. He basically said, is there such a thing as a soul contract? If so, what is it? Why would we even make one? Can we break them? I mean, you know, can they be changed? Are we chained to these soul contracts? You know, or is it some kind of freedom? He's bombarding me with all these questions because he didn't understand. He'd read this phrase somewhere, and I said, hold on, I don't know the answers to your questions. Let me bring the nine in. So the nine came in to speak to my partner to answer his questions, brought through all this information, and then 3 days later, I said to my partner, I'm going to ask the nine to bring that information forward again and do a video for YouTube, and I'm going to call the video Masters of the Matrix. So I started to transcribe their information, as I always do, believing it was another video. And then this particular transcription, which I can always see beforehand, actually, is an energy sort of structure, which I now know is a monad. I would sort of decode that monad as I'm communicating with them. And this one was much more intense and more intricate, and it just went on and on and on, and was opening up to so many more concepts. And then I realized, well, there's no way I'm going to wrap this up in a 10-minute, 20-minute video. I realized then that it was a book. And so that was the first book in 2016, and that's this one here, Masters of the Matrix. And then in 2017, I deliberately decided I wanted to write a book, but I was just going for a conversation with the nine to see where things would go. Had no idea that the material in this book would follow on from the last one. So it's like the nine have planned, or from a higher dimensional point of view, or from the pre-incarnate point of view, or however you want to look at it, planned this. But the physical me didn't realize this. That's how it works with everybody, by the way. This is how it works. So 2016, Divine Architecture and the Starseed template. And then the same thing kind of happened again in February this year. I released a video called Dark Deeds, Pole Shift, The Law of One, and I can't remember the other part of it, but it was basically a question. I asked the nine, why are the truthers being kicked off social media? Because at that time in February, some of the really big truthers were losing their platforms on Twitter and YouTube and everywhere. So I was asking the nine, why are they being kicked off? Are we as Starseeds going to lose our platforms? Are we not going to be able to speak and deliver this information? That channeling came forward, which is a video up on YouTube. And then in about 2 months ago, I think, just over, I asked the nine, I wanted to do an analysis of that particular channeling, as I felt it was really important to talk about why the truthers were losing their platforms and what it meant. And so I wanted to do an analysis, and I thought I'd turn that into a very small ebook, because I realized the analysis would be bigger than just a video. I've done analysis before of the transmissions, but usually just me speaking to the camera. So, and it'll take between 7 and 15 videos of about an hour long each one to analyze the 15-minute channeling. So I knew that this would be a small ebook. And then this one went on and on and on and branched into completely different areas, into Stargate Ascension. And although the truth that information was touched on, I never did finish the analysis of that particular transmission. The nine had other ideas. And this is The Infinite Helix and the Emerald Flame, Sacred Mysteries of Stargate Ascension. And this was released for sale yesterday.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so I'm very, very pleased about these books, and it's been a wonderful journey. This last one was crazy, and this is what I mean by the training, because I wrote that book in 5 weeks. These first two I transcribed in 3 to 4 months, and they're smaller. This is like twice the size, as you can see.
Yeah.
And it took me 5 weeks, because the intensity of the energy at the moment, as any starseed will tell you, and it was daily and nightly. I mean, can you imagine? Normally I get a break, you know, I'll sort of be doing normal 3D things, and I'll be getting information for a new video every few days, or, you know, once a week, or however. And this was every day, all day and all night for 5 whole weeks. So it was incredibly intense. I would, all night long, they would be talking to me, and I'd wake up with not just one concept, not just one monad, but several. And I'd see them all. I'm like, how on earth am I going to decode all this? And I would just grab my laptop and start decoding them all into these different areas. And it really did blow my mind. And I said to them, I'm so glad you guys trained me back in 1993, and you know, because I wouldn't be able to do this right now. I would fall apart because it was way more intense, but I was okay because I know what to do now. And like I said, this is the journey the Starseeds are on. They're all going through this. They're all going through this. Thousands of us, millions.
Yeah. So is the Starseed, is that would be like the first generation of like what we would now call like the indigo kids and stuff like that? Is there any connection there?
Yeah, all the indigo children are Starseeds. All the crystal children are Starseeds. But what's really interesting, all the truthers are Starseeds. You know, and they're not following a new age path particularly. They're not sitting talking about rainbows and you know, emerald flames and diamond codes. A lot of them don't even like that. Like this guy I knew who was a great friend of mine, who he hated the new age. He just couldn't bear it. He didn't like the way that spirituality was presented, even though he spoke to channels like me, because he knew we had information. But he was, if you asked him, what are you? He would say, I'm a investigator, I'm a researcher, I'm a scientist, I'm an astrologer, and I'm a Kabbalist. But he would not ever subscribe to New Age. There's a lot of Starseeds that, you know, the New Age repels them. And to be honest with you, I don't really I've never put myself in a New Age box and thought I am New Age. I realized that I am by virtue of the fact that I'm channeling and I am talking about rainbow light codes and DNA activation. But it's just an umbrella term, and it can be very off-putting, but it has its positives as well. The New Age are somewhat shielded from the direct attacking, if you like, or targeting that's coming in from service to self structures, you know, whatever you want to call them, cabal, Illuminati, deep state, whatever, because they're seen as, you know, it's nonsense, it's pseudo science, that they're not really, you know, it's the truthers that are taking the hit, which is why I've been calling for unity between truthers and lightworkers, because truthers cannot do this on their own. They need us, and we can't do it on our own. We can't bring the deep state down with only this. It's got to be done on the 3rd dimensional level. But you can't just do it on 3D either. We've got to go in on all the dimensional levels. So we're all needed together as a team, because they have that. They have multi-levels.
Seems like they've got us pitted against each other right now.
Yeah, exactly. And I watched that video of yours where you were with that other guy on his radio show, and you were talking about the truth. Yeah, Jeff, and you were talking about the truthers and the, you know, the New Agers, and part of me kind of cringes at having to categorize us like that, because that's what they want. But you have to generalize to a certain extent. I mean, but there is a bunch of different groups that are all connected. Like, even if you look into the health and fitness or the biohacking community, where they're realizing that so much of this stuff has been unhealthy as well. And then there's the New Age community and the truthers. Like I feel like we straddle. I feel like we're the type of show that straddles a lot of that already. Like, we do touch on a lot of different topics, and I'm a little bit more New Agey than Darren, and like, I'm fine with people teasing me like that. But then we also
I'm fine with teasing.
We also approach all these truther type things as well. I mean, but I don't really know what necessarily you mean by truther. But I mean, we do touch on all the, you know, the vaccine bullshit and the 9/11 stuff and all the main topics. But then there's a whole bunch of little stuff as well. So I do like that initiative of like trying to bring everybody together a little bit there and make sure that we are. I mean, I don't know where you go at, how you describe that. Like, how do you get us all to have a coherent message? But I think the start of it is just to start talking about it. I think
it's becoming more difficult than I envisaged. I just thought, yay, let's all just unify. You know, truth is, you're going to love us lot and we're going to love you lot. I mean, I'm a truther as well. I mean, all the Starseeds are. They just do it in a different way. Although I will go down into the 3D stuff and the political stuff more than the average Starseed does. I mean, I say not Starseed because, like I said, the truth is Starseeds. And I agree with you. It's difficult to label everybody. When I say truther, it's a respectful term for people who are known as conspiracy theorists.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, and that's very wrong because that suggests they're nutters that just believe any conspiracy going. A truther is someone searching for truth. So obviously that does actually encompass all of us.
Yeah.
And a starseed, these are individuals that have come here for this journey. They've incarnated here for this reason, and they each have different roles. So starseeds are not just New Age light workers. They are truthers and scientists and musicians. And I mentioned the gaming community. Many, many youngsters who are sitting gaming all day long on their games are starseeds. And the games, I'm not talking about perhaps violent ones and car crashes, but these fantasy games like World of Warcraft, that sort of stuff. These are activating games. I mean, if you're sitting there 24/7, you may have issues with it, but these are activating games. There's truth in there too. So there's different communities.
That's so funny. We were just talking about it before we got on.
Now you're encouraging these guys in their Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, well, before we got on with her, and I was talking to Brody here.
I've been trying to wheel that back
about about the parallels between some of the stuff that we do in Dungeons and Dragons with like real life and the magic and the
massive and the same with fantasy fiction in books and films. I'm currently watching you probably won't believe this, but I've never really watched the Marvel Cinematic Universe until like 2 weeks ago. The only one I was interested in was Thor, and I watched that. But we decided we would watch Marvel Cinematic Universe from the beginning. So I've never seen Iron Man or any of those.
Okay,
so we started watching them 2 weeks ago, and I cannot believe
the similarities, right? Yeah.
The disclosure in these films.
Yeah.
And my son said to me, you know, Mum, you wait till you get to Avengers Infinity. And I'm like, no, I can't wait. So we're sort of halfway through at the moment. All the films, watching them in order. We're on Captain America, Civil War. That's the next one.
Yeah.
But they're disclosure films. It's unbelievable. So you're looking at fantasy coming in on many levels. All of this, as I said, pre-planned, and we're sort of living it out, if you like, these different roles.
So speak about that, the timing. I do want to go back to the process of your channeling at some point, but let's continue on with this thing and speak to the change in our political climate. I mean, not necessarily getting too political, but how this is really shifting and people are like, there does seem to be a more awareness around the control system and how evil, I don't know if evil is the right term, but I mean, you know, when you talk about truthers, there's the whole pedogate thing as well. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff coming to light for people that I mean, I didn't expect it to be so intense.
Are we going to get alt-right up in here?
No, not about right and left, just about the elite and how controlling it is. Then it goes into the corporations and the political structure and the fake charities, and I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Like everything is a freaking illusion right now. Yeah,
because right and left is a little bit of a false construct, and because, you know, the cabal, if you like, will have operatives in both of those. So it's like, well, you all think you've got a choice. You choose between the left or the right, but we're in both. I mean, yes, they're predominantly left, but that's, you know, they still have the right as well. So it's like whoever you vote for. What I was shown, I mean, I've never been particularly interested or really even understood politics or physics or science or maths. I've always been more of a arty person than a sort of left-brained thinking person. So obviously when the Nine started to talk to me about all this stuff, but it's so intertwined, it's so very connected. You can't really take a spiritual path and truly be whole unless you're looking at everything. So, I mean, I do have people say to me, Magenta, why do you talk about politics? I've had people say you're losing your credibility by discussing Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I don't think they seem to understand. They don't seem to understand that this is the third dimensional presentation of the shift. It isn't just happening on the 11th dimension. You know, we're not all just waking up to the diamond light codes and whizzing off into a ball of light. Yes, we're doing that, but it's all happening here in this reality. We need to look at all of it. So the first thing the nine showed me was when it comes to this political shift, if you were to look at the Earth say, as a flat disk, and I'm not meaning as if it were flat.
Oh,
that's
boy.
a whole other issue. The nine have discussed that with me as well. That's not what I mean. I mean, if you were to just look
wait. You can't just gloss over what did the nine say about the flat Earth then?
Well, I can definitely come back to that.
Can we come back to that? Yeah, let's make a note to come back to that.
But I'm talking about countries and places energetically and what's happening. If you were to look at that construction as a flat disk, America is right in the middle. America is right in the very, very center of this. So this is energetic presentation. And if you imagine a water going down a plug hole, so, you know, you let the water out the bath and it's going to swirl around slowly. And then when it gets to the center, it's really, really fast as it goes down the plug hole, isn't it? Yeah. I know there's a word for this, but I don't know what it is. So
centrifugal force?
Yeah, that's probably it. So America's right in the center. That means everything's really intense and fast there. And then the waves of intensity. So this is specifically political and financial, and the revealing of that which has been hidden. So it's all in America, and then it's filtering out into the rest of the planet. So we're all getting the backlash waves depending on where we are. I'm in the UK, although we're going a bit intense as well at the moment. But that's kind of what they told me. And so I followed the political, not really in a big way, but I followed the political changes. And what I saw was when Obama and McCain were in the election, I could see the two timelines, and the energy was really on, from the Illuminati Cabal point of view. McCain was the person. Is it McCain?
McCain, yeah.
McCain, yeah. The energy was on McCain, and the actual timeline there was a terrible trajectory. Obama was a better trajectory. So obviously I really, really hoped Obama would win the election at that time, because I could see the different timelines. I now realize it's because of what was yet to come, not what was happening there. It's where it would lead in the future. And but I have to say that at that time, Obama had an energy that, you know, at the time you could think, well, maybe his energy, he will do something. And there seemed to be some
hope.
Yeah.
Oh,
hope,
I got sucked right into it. I remember where I was when that whole thing happened. I was like, yes, this is awesome. We are change. Like, was it We Are Change? Or
I don't know what it was.
What was it? What was his tag? Anyways, like I was sucked right in. I got all emotional. I probably even shed a couple tears that night. I was like, wow, this is amazing.
Did you do the same thing for Trudeau?
It was amazing, and it was awesome because of where it's led. Because had McCain got in, we're looking at a trajectory for World War III. I mean, that's the trajectory for that particular timeline. I mean, I'm looking at multi-levels here. We would have always been able to move around. You know, we would always be able to change it, because it's all down to us. It's not an outside thing. It's not like, oh, if they get in to power, that's it, we're doomed. And if this person gets in, we're saved. It's not like that. The power is with us. But I'm looking at what the timelines were showing me. So when Obama got in, I was very pleased, because I could see that was not a trajectory for World War III. It was way on the sidelines, and there was some good things there. And then I saw very, very quickly, I mean, a matter of maybe 2 or 3 weeks, instead of this hopeful energy, this sort of endearing energy in a way, that, you know, there was some darkness there, but it wasn't that bad. It looked like it would be okay. And within 2 to 3 weeks, everything changed.
That quickly?
For me, it was that,
Wow.
And I just thought, oh my goodness, it was like, it was almost as though, in my opinion, that, you know, I don't want to, it's like, it's hot, it's difficult, because the 9 give me boundaries about what I can and can't say, but it's almost as though
Well, you don't want to lose half your audience either, so.
No, it's not. It's
That's what happened to us.
Yeah, it's not about that.
No, I'm just kidding.
It isn't about losing audience. I'll tell you what it's about. When you put something out, you are not just delivering information, you are creating.
Yeah.
And there are those within the service to self factions that are able to see those creations. So the 9 teach me to hold these boundaries when I speak. And so what I would say is that there was a compromising energy. If you like, Obama had some light and had some hope and was compromised. How? That's up to the listener to sort of research it. But it was still a good result because it's taken us into this next pathway, and that obviously causes even more controversy. I mean, there's a huge, huge split. And unless you can actually, you won't understand what's going on politically right now if you see this from a third dimensional point of view.
That's right.
Because you are looking head on and you're not looking above the energetic. You must go to 5D, the 5th dimension, at least, to view what is happening. If you start looking from the 3rd dimension, you will never get it. So you've got Hillary Clinton and you've got Donald Trump. And when I saw those two, and this is after the election, I was told to pay no attention whatsoever to the American election at all. I didn't even really know anything about either of these candidates. I knew Donald Trump had been in the news a bit. I remember seeing his wife in the papers a lot with her like new hairstyle and handbags and stuff, but that's kind of all I knew. It wasn't till after the election that the 9 said, now I can look. And so I looked at these two people and I looked at Hillary and thought, oh gosh, you know, she's like well in the cabal, groomed from day one to take this role. And, I saw that it was a good thing that she had not won. And then I looked at Donald Trump, kind of expecting to see another cabal member that maybe had a bit of light around them. And bang, I'm like, oh my goodness, he's not in the cabal at all. This guy is completely independent.
Wow.
So that was wonderful to see, because I'm like, how did he even get in?
Yeah.
And then I looked a bit further, and what I saw was there was some attempt from the people who wanted Hillary in. There was some attempt to sort of hijack the voting system, and that was successful somewhat. And even with the attempt to hijack the voting system, Trump still got in. And the reason being is people kept their feelings secret.
Yep.
They didn't tell. So the polls or whatever would never have shown what was really going on in the hearts of the people. And that still happens now.
Yeah.
I actually have had people contact me, and get this, I've had people contact me who are married and they haven't even told their partner that they voted for Trump, because they're that secret with it. Because you say that you voted for him and that you like him and you like what he's doing, and you are attacked viciously. And that attack is coming in from lots of different areas. Yeah. One is deliberate cabal members who are kind of paid or missioned to go out there and, you know, put Trump down on every social media platform you can find. Obviously, you've got the controlled media system that are, you know, only telling us what they want us to know.
Yeah.
And then you've actually got people who are believing the false narrative that is presented in media and on social media. And then you've got the genuine people who really don't know, because they are seeing things from 3rd, maybe even 4th dimensional perspective. And what they're looking at is thinking, well, look, Trump is a bit of a clown, and he's narcissistic, and he's really loud, and he said some really gross things about women in the locker room 20 odd years ago or whatever. That makes him really, really horrible, and we don't want him as a president. Now, in an ideal world where there's no cabal, no control system, they're right. They're right. He's not got the honor and the absolute ethics in his presentation. I won't say it's not there at all. In his presentation, to be a president of a country. But we're not living in a world that is not controlled. We're living in a world where there's a cabal, and he's independent. He got in through the back door somehow. But if you look further, and this has come from me, I've wanted to see things, and sometimes I've just been sent there without knowing. I've actually been in a remote viewed, and Trump does have honor. He does present with this sort of mild narcissistic personality. I can understand that, but of course he needs that. There's no way somebody who is as pure and loving and kind and sweet and light, they wouldn't exist. He has to have this this personality that is very sort of, it's almost as though he's thinking, right, this is me, and yeah, okay, so if it's narcissistic, it's like, this is me, and nobody is going to attack me because, you know, I'm going to get affronted by that. Everything comes back to me. If you want to take that as a narcissistic personality trait. But what he does is he adds America in with himself. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, this is me and I am America. Therefore, he's narcissistic regarding America. He will defend America as if it's his own self. And that is why he's the greatest person on this job.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Wow. Because, I mean, I flip-flop back and forth about whether he's truly independent or whether he's got the other deep state backing, you know, the other cabal. I mean, it does feel like it's almost a spiritual warfare at that higher level, and almost the, you know, the deep state versus the what's the other there's another name for the
shallow state.
No, like the other side of the deep state. There's like the Trump cabal or whatever, like people, what,
Democrats.
No. You're not helping at all. So I can't remember like the anyways, but yeah, I mean, flip flop back and forth.
The white hats.
I don't see another cabal. The cabal is there are different factions that don't actually present as if they are related in any way, but they are. It's a hive mind movement that can present as independent factions, and you'll never actually connect the dots that they are actually connected. So it might look like there's more than one,
right?
But there's one. They're all, because this is about energetics. It's like saying, well, are there two service to selves? You know, no, there's one service to self frequency, but it manifests in many, many different sections. And there's a service to others frequency manifesting in many, many different sections, because we're in, you know, dualism here.
Yeah.
Recently I remote viewed, and this wasn't intentional. It was the night of the 31st of May into the 1st of June. And I just found myself there. And I witnessed Donald Trump. And what I actually saw was, he had to make some kind of decision, and there were many ways he could go, and there were all these other people around him, and loads and loads and loads of starseeds there. And many people woke up the next morning feeling that they had done something big the night before, because I spoke to lots of people about this after putting out a Facebook status. So lots of people wrote to me. There was a great relief, and there was a big shift that had taken place. The Nine call this the New World Treaty, almost as if a treaty was made. What I actually saw, yes, I saw Donald Trump make this treaty with other people as well, who were also leaders, but he was like the central character within this, and all the starseeds were there, and there were some cabal there, but they couldn't get anywhere near this. And when I saw Trump make the decision, there were many ways he could have gone, and he could have chosen something that was not in integrity, and he would have been rewarded, if you like, from another faction.
Yeah.
But he didn't make decisions based on he doesn't make decisions based on what he could get. He makes decisions based on what is right for who he is as a person. And as I said, he includes America in that. It's like, I am Donald Trump and I am America, which, yeah, might be a bit narcissistic. It's like, you know, but it's what we need. So he makes a decision for America. And of course, this filters out into the world. You know, it's not just an American decision. He's making a decision for planet Earth. And when I watched him, obviously I can't see what the decisions were or what the treaty was. What I could see is the energetic frequency of the decision-making process, and every single decision was absolutely in alignment with integrity.
Wow.
And I couldn't believe it. And I'm just like, wow, that's what I would have done, you know?
So have you gotten lots of negative feedback from your base about this? I mean, because we barely touch on this, and all of a sudden we're labeled alt-right and all this stuff. It's pretty funny. But I mean, it's pretty risky in a way, but
massively risky. I know, but this is the thing, when you're an indigo, you know, you speak out.
Yeah.
And yes, it's risky for me because obviously people hear me speak and think, oh my goodness, Magenta, that's it, unsubscribing, not listening to your videos again, I'm not going to be buying your books. This is not about people watching my videos, and it's not about people buying my books.
Yeah.
It's not about me dividing people into Trump or anti-Trump. It's simply about me being a conduit, which is a channel for higher dimensional information, B, someone who's able to remote view and be psychic.
Yeah.
All I can give you is my perspective. I'm not saying I'm right.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
but there's also the risk that you mentioned, like, you know, you approach the topic of why are all the truthers being censored off social media? That's a very important question. And then, you know, if you're addressing a lot of this stuff, do you have that fear that that's going to happen to you? I mean, how many people have lost their YouTube channels or their, you know, been censored? I mean, do you worry about that at all?
No, I don't worry about it at all, because I know that there will always be a backdoor for every single starseed. So if you get kicked off one platform, there will be a way that you will get back to being able to deliver your message. The only way that they could actually shut the starseeds down is to actually shut down the entire internet. And they cannot do that because they need the internet for their own agenda, and they need it massively.
Yeah.
If they shut the internet down, they completely cut off their nose to spite their face, kind of thing. And the thing is, this is what the Nine mean when they say, there's one of my videos where the Nine actually address the cabal in the channeling, in the transmission, and they say,
which video is that? Do you know?
Yeah, it's the video where the image is of a chessboard. I think it's the dissolution of the process of the veils. It might be the one about the Illuminati. I mean, I can't remember the exact name of it, but there's a chessboard. And the reason why we use the chessboard, because they used the analogy of a chess game, and they say, you have checkmated yourselves. I didn't know what that meant when they said this. I thought, how have they checkmated themselves? It's not just the internet, it's other stuff. But what the Nine since have said to me is, they created these systems that they could use to control, you know, the world, if you like, the planet. And those very systems are now being used by the Starseeds and the Truthers, etc., etc. So they're using their own systems without realizing, or some of them may realize, and they can't shut the systems down that they created because they're using the systems. And one of those systems is the internet. And the Nine say that everything's flipping back. So there's a negative seed point and a negative intention and a negative trajectory. When the planetary morphogenetic field, or the energetic, massive aura, if you like, energetic field, when that is of a predominantly negative frequency, then these negative seed points and negative trajectories, they work. They work, and they create the negative outcome that was intended, or something similar. But when a planetary system is predominantly of a positively polarized vibration energetically, that negative trajectory cannot hold. It's flipping into positive because everything's going positive. And the reason why we have a predominantly positively polarized frequency is because of the starseeds. That's why the truthers, who can actually, without realizing, lend energy to the service to self groups through anger, hatred, fear. You know, if you've got truthers saying, right, cabal, I'm going to get you lot, you know, you're going down, you know, that kind of thing, they can lend energy to them because they feed on that. So you've got the starseeds, the light workers, that are coming in from love, compassion, unity, forgiveness. You know, we forgive the cabal. We are, you know, which is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
So people say, what do you mean you forgive them? Well, look at what they've done. Look at what they've done to the children of Earth. How can you forgive them? The answer is, we cannot make changes on this planet without forgiveness, because it's not just an emotion, it's a frequency, it's code, it's a code, and we need to use those codes. The starseeds, the light workers, that's what they are doing. They're holding that frequency. They've created this positive polarization so that you truthers, when you come in with your positive intentions, they are going right in there and they're working, as long as you get the balance right. If the truthers attack head on, they're going to lose their platforms and they're going to be targeted because then they're not going above. So the truthers can learn from the light workers, but some of the light workers have floated off to the new world, and they're sitting there having a picnic with their rainbows and unicorns, and they don't want to know what's going on here. We need them to come back. So, you know, we've got imbalances in both camps. We need to unify all of us, and we do that by unifying ourselves. We unify individually, and then we unify as a collective, and we can help one another. But I've actually been involved recently in, you know, practically assisting with this unification between truthers and light workers, and it is proving more difficult than I envisaged that it would be. I didn't think it would be quite so difficult, but there is a way it can be done. So
well, it's hard to tease out who's been compromised in all these groups. I mean, I feel like that's kind of part of the problem. Is there's a lot of disinformation out there as well. The true truthers and the true light workers, like, it's probably fairly easy. You could probably, you know, bring them together fairly easy, but it's the dissension among the ranks that's there on purpose, I think, which is the difficulty in trying to tease that out of there. So what are some of the other things you think people should do to come together? Like, you know, you mentioned the negativity and the attacking, and I totally agree with you. It's the forgiveness. It's like what that guest, that show that I really loved with Greg Doyle. And he was in the astral state, like, for a week-long thing, going back and forth and attacking this evil entity. And as soon as he brought it back to his heart, and I think forgiveness was a part of that, that's when that he got out of that situation. And I truly believe that forgiveness is the key.
Yeah, so, and gratitude is even more important. You have to be thankful. It's like saying thank you for the cabal. I mean, how many people can do that? Thank you for being here. Thank you for the things you've done. It's not a nonsensical emotion without having any substance. It's a frequency.
They can measure it with gratitude. They can measure people in gratitude. This is the new science and stuff in the health and wellness community, where if you go into a gratitude meditative state, like, you can measure the difference in your I can't even remember what it is they're measuring, but it's positive.
I bet.
Yeah.
Sounds super
it's
positive.
Either your heart or your head or something.
Well, the thing is, you can't just take forgiveness and gratitude as an emotion on its own. It's got to be integrated forgiveness and integrated emotion. And what that means is you take the stance of a justice warrior, an indigo warrior, you know, a defender of the realm, a knight of the round table. You take those energies as well. You ground those energies. So it's like, I'm going to hold my sword high, and I'm going to forgive you, and I'm going to be compassionate, and I'm going to be in gratitude for you, but I hold my sword high. But you don't get your sword and chop someone's head off with it. You hold it high. It's a symbol. It's a symbol. It is not a tool for destruction. This is the energy we must find collectively.
Yeah, I like it. So
you were saying, you were just saying earlier about not knowing who is
the dissenters among you
know, which person is kosher, which person is genuine. I've spoken to the Nine about this as well, and what they tell me is there's a massive lesson in discernment going on right now, right across the board. Why are we being given a lesson in discernment? The reason being is when you discern, you use all your faculties and you actually strengthen the spiritual or energetic systems of the body. So you actually upgrade the solar plexus chakra, if you like. Your gut feeling gets stronger. You open the heart chakra because your intuition gets stronger. You activate the third eye chakra because your insight, your clairvoyant sight gets stronger. Everyone is being upgraded, and there has to be a way that is done. So if you can't discern through research, you can find information through research, but your own discernment. This person, say we've got here, you know, person A and person B. Is this person A right, or is this person B right? They're not going to say to me, "Oh, it's B. He's the one that's right." they're going to guide me into making that decision myself, and I'm going to work this out for myself, and I'm going to look at all the evidence available energetically and wherever I can find it and think, I think it's B. Then they will either confirm or give me more information to be able to ascertain. And at the moment I'm in the process of trying to work out whether these insiders in the truth communities are genuine. Are they from a supportive alliance, light, or are they from the cabal? I'm talking about, like, you know, Q, and there's a new one that's just come on the scene for the UK in the last few days. So the 9 aren't going to give me the answers, but they are going to teach me how to discern and give me the tools so that I can come to a conclusion. That's what we're all doing, basically. Every single one of us is doing that.
Yeah, but it's a challenge. That's the word I was looking for the other day, is the alliance.
Yeah.
A little bit ago is the alliance. So, but that's hard for us, like hard for me to discern that, because like you said, you can do all the research, but I mean, a lot of that is hard to sift through. It's disinformation, and my head is full of biases and, you know, past experiences and thoughts swirling around. Like, how do you know, put all that aside and go into your energy system or whatever and tell? I mean, it's difficult for us to get to that point.
So that's where you take all that information that you have, which is useful, and you have to look at whether you're being distracted. That's a massive clue. Is this situation distracting me from my goal? You need to know your mission, first of all. You also need to be clear. You need to be clear of trauma. If you're not completely and utterly clear, but clear to a point where you can function. If you are covered in, you know, shadow traumas, that will confuse you so much that you're unable to discern. Right.
So you mean personally distract? To check whether you're personally distracted, or whether that societal thing or that information is distracting, like a higher level distraction, or personally distracted.
Well, all of these, but you would look at your mission and you would think, right, this is my mission, this is my role, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Is this a distraction, or is it part of my mission? Is it complementing my mission? Right, okay. Completely taking me away from it. Oh, okay. If it's completely taking you away from it, utterly, and you are not feeling good, and it's okay to be that way for a while, a few days, while but if you're there a long time, then that's not your path. This is what the 9 are doing with these books that they've written. They're starting off with the assisting you to become clear and work through the shadows and the traumas, and then get your matrix in a place of sovereignty, which means immunity to hijacking. Once you're immune from hijacking, that's why I'm not worried about speaking about this. I know where my boundaries are and what I can and can't say, and I'm worried. And if I lose my YouTube channel, then, you know, then I do. But, you know, you find sovereignty, you find trust, and you're not going to find it in the 3rd dimension. It's higher than that. So then you would go into the heart. You would take all this information, assuming you're clear with the shadow and you found your immunity and your strength. You would then go into all the information. So you're going to be getting information from many sources, because we're in a time period. Not only are we in this collective lesson in discernment, we're in the time period the 9 called the deluge. It's like a tidal wave. That's why many starseeds, many light workers are getting images of tidal waves engulfing them. It's metaphoric for the wave of information is coming in on all levels. You're getting downloads, uploads, insights, psychic information. You are seeing things on social media. You are reading things wherever you go. The deluge is everywhere. So you're being engulfed with information. So you look at everything that you can assimilate. You look at all this information, and you analyze with the mind, but then you take that and go. And there are many methods to do this. This is just one method. Go into the heart. And one method that the 9 teach me, which is so simple and so effective, is learning how to use what they call the vertical pillar of light, also known as Excalibur, the sword of truth. So this is the Excalibur Codex. It is a fail-safe immunity program that has been placed in the energetic fields of all the starseeds before they incarnate. It cannot be hijacked. There has to be these agreements made with the group soul aspect, if you like, on both sides, in both negative and positive, to keep balance there. So you have this system within Starseeds that can be hijacked, but the Excalibur Codex cannot. And the Excalibur Codex, there's many layers to this. It's all in my new book, but the Excalibur, if you imagine that Excalibur is a sword. It's also the rod and the staff in the inside the Ark of the Covenant. It's the same thing. It is your trajectory that is like a pillar of light, and you stand within that. And this is like it's kind of like a resonance field. It's like a truthometer. It's like an inner lie detector. So your name, what's your first name?
Graham.
Right, and that's your birth name, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you actually say to me right now, my name is Graham, and you must make it a statement, my name is Graham.
My name is Graham.
Okay. So how do you feel? How do you feel when you say my name is Graham? How do you feel when you say
good.
it?
I feel good.
Okay. Now I want you to say, my name is Peter.
My name is Peter.
And how do you feel when you say that?
Weird.
Yeah. So that's like very, very simple. So that's a really simple, really basic way of doing this. What I'm saying
like a calibration in a way, right? Sort of calibrate the difference between.
It's like kinesiology, but with your voice. And the thing is, the reason why it works, if you're clear and you are not covered in shadows and you are not hijacked and attacked and you haven't got implants and.
There we go again with the.
This
Oh, there we go.
Sorry, we've lost your audio for a second here.
The interwebs.
Is it our internet, do you think? Oh, no.
Knows what is true and what is not, because you are tapping into a quantum field where everything that's ever happened, everything that's happening now in any timeline and in any possibility or
We're losing our connection here, Magenta. I'm not sure if you can hear us or not. She wouldn't be able to hear us.
It's not working one way.
Seems to be working on that one still.
Uh-oh.
You have no audio either.
Okay.
Oh. You need to do the work
Magenta.
first.
Magenta. Sorry, we just lost you for a couple minutes. We lost you. We lost you at the quantum part. When you're looking at everything that's happened, everything that will happen, like getting that from the quantum. Yeah. Could you?
Yes, you're in a quantum field with the DNA structure. So you're looking at everything that's ever happened, everything that's happening now in all timelines and all probabilities, and everything that ever will happen. So that field is known to you at that level. So as long as you are clear of shadow and of trauma.
Yeah.
And you have become immune and you've taken that sovereignty and you have not floated off and you are remaining anchored within the third dimension, you then have the tools to be able to use this discernment. Okay,
that makes sense. So I mean, I don't know how much time we have to dig into this, but how can you summarize maybe some steps? And I don't know if you've written this in your books or not, but to how to get rid of the trauma, how to clear yourself a little bit of that?
Yes, I can. I mean, I'll just go to one chapter in Masters of the Matrix, and there are 4 steps basically going through this very basically. The first step to dealing with trauma is acknowledgement. You acknowledge the trauma.
Yep.
If you don't acknowledge it, then you can't work through it. You need to know it's there. So you do whatever it takes to find out what is there. If it means counseling, if it means therapy, healing, massage, swimming, yoga, eating a raw food diet, meditation, whatever it takes to acknowledge.
Okay.
So acknowledgement, and you can do this by, you can create, an entity from this. So say you're feeling fear, but you don't know why. Name the fear. I feel fear. Okay, so that's the first step. The second step is gratitude. You have to get to this point, and this is like not easy work. It's not easy work. I understand that. It's a massive delving deep into yourself. But that's why so many light workers will say, work on yourself. You hear that and you think, what does that mean, work on yourself? It means nothing. We're trying to take the cabal down. What do you mean work on yourself? I haven't got time for that. But unless you do it, you can't get there. So the next step is gratitude, and it's like it's so grateful for this fear. Thank you to the fear, and that's hard. But gratitude changes the fear, because what you are doing here is you're changing the energy. If you see your energetic matrix as a large database or computer, you feed code into this computer, and this code is a sixth dimensional computer database, if you like. It's a structure, it's geometric structure, and the code you feed it filters down into the third dimension and creates an energetic match. It's called the law of attraction, but it's presented through geometry and through the sixth dimension instead of through visualization, which is just as good, but some people just don't resonate with the new age kind of law of attraction thing. So it's just another way of explaining it. So what you do is, when you've got shadow trauma buried, you're constantly feeding codes of trauma into that matrix and creating more of the same. So you end up in the dark night of the soul, or into a negative spiral. The minute you acknowledge, that changes, because no longer do you have fear, buried fear, you have acknowledged fear. So that becomes a different code. And then you go to gratitude. Oh my goodness, that's very different. No longer do you have fear, you have acknowledged fear and gratitude of it. That then creates more codes in your reality for you to be grateful for discovering these traumas, and that becomes evident in your everyday life everywhere you go. It shows up like magic. The next step is analysis. So you analyze this trauma. Why is it there? Why do you feel fear? You know, what's the reason for it? Why did this happen? It's deep work, and if you need a partner to go through the work with you, then go for that. And the final step is integration. You integrate these emotions and these feelings and these new discoveries, then you've completely changed the code. You might not have got rid of the fear entirely. You no longer have fear as an entity attacking you or infiltrating you, or allowing you to be vulnerable to infiltration from fourth dimensional entities, AI or Cabal or whatever you want to call it. What you have is integration of fear. So your life becomes integrated. So I can't sort of obviously go through the entire methods, but they're the steps. So whatever it takes to do those steps, and you know, this book is only like
so that's
$4 or $5.
Yeah, which one is that? Which book is that again?
That's the first one.
Oh, your first book. Okay,
yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah. Step.
Yeah, no, that's a good summary. It makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah. It's,
that's about matrix awareness. You become aware that you are a matrix. You are an energy system. It's not matrix used in the same term that many use the matrix.
That's funny. I was gonna mention that earlier on. It's your own matrix, right? Not
if you like, there are two matrices. One's organic, and it's natural, and it's created from source, God, the creator. And one is an infiltration. It is a false screen. It's an inverted system. And that's the one that's created by service to self, energetics, extraterrestrial and ultra-dimensional consciousness structures, etc., and Cabal, whatever you want to call it. It's multi-layered, which is why we need to be multi-layered. So you become aware of that matrix system that's you. It's actually a toroidal field around you. It's also known as the Merkaba. It's, you know, there's many names to call this structure. And the 9 start off very, very basically. When I wrote this, I didn't understand it. I had to read this book. When I channeled it, I read it through 6 times before I could even understand this material myself. And they're telling me it's basic. I'm like, what? You know. So that's matrix awareness, and then matrix mastery. That's why you become a master of the matrix. Mastery over your matrix, because if you have mastery over your matrix, which is sovereignty, your matrix is everything. We're all one. Therefore, you have mastery over your entire reality as an individual consciousness structure, because you are the only incarnated individual in existence. Everyone else is just another you in another timeline. What we're actually doing here is all becoming integrated and individualized at the same time. And that's known as Ascension, which is, again, an off-putting word for people who don't like the New Age. Call it collective integration. There's a reason we're doing this, and it's not just about taking down the Cabal. It's actually natural. It's as natural as the sun shining in the morning, going down at night, and the moon coming out. It's a natural natural cycle. It happens to all planets, all galaxies. It happens to all cosmoses. It's natural and normal. It's creation itself.
How long are we in the deluge process for here?
Oh wow, that's a good question.
Couple weeks or
couple weeks more. We're getting kind of we want things to move on a little bit.
Oh gosh, it's more than 2 weeks. We are right. What's actually happening?
Couple
with
months.
Deluge? It's like many more than that. It's they're going in waves. So this is collective and individual. So some individuals may have integrated their deluge experience already. So they're not being bombarded with information, and they don't need to discern or analyze because they've kind of done that for one specific or several specific concepts, if you like. So we are all in a sort of domino effect as to where we are. But when you look collectively, no one's asked me this question, so I will look. I mean, the deluge, it's a good thing because it is waking us up. It's helping us analyze. But we're really slap bang in the middle of it right now, massively. But at the same time, we're in the indigo revolution, which is when the warriors take their power and hold their sword up and say, no more. This stops now, Cabal. We've had enough. But we forgive you, and we're in gratitude for you, but we don't need your level of polarity anymore to show us who we are. It can have a different kind of polarity now. That's where we need to be, rather than, let's get them all, It's got to be an integrated warrior, knight of the round table energy.
Yeah.
It's not, and that's where it's so difficult for the light workers and the truthers to come together, because the truthers are in a battle, they're in a war, and the light workers will run a mile from anything that holds the energy of battle or war, because what you take on energetically creates an intention. And we know that we cannot do our job if we're in a war or battle, because that's duality, and we must embrace unity. However, if we only embrace unity, we are no longer in duality, and we are just as lost to the overall assistance that's needed on this planet than if we were in a battle.
Yeah.
So we need to embrace the fact that we're in a battle or a war, but we need to find ways to upgrade that. So an army becomes warriors, you see. A fight becomes holding the sword of truth high with the Knights of the Round Table stood next to us. That's why this is the Excalibur Codex. The Excalibur Codex is the codex for the Indigo Revolution.
Wow, it's hard to keep that, because we go through this, and like Darren and I are both going through different personal waves and stuff where we're, ignoring the kind of the social medias and sort of going into our own inner work a little bit more, and then. But it is hard when we talk about all these topics to separate, not get dragged down into that negativity and the fight. When you're approaching these conspiratorial things. So I find myself constantly flipping back and forth between resentment and anger on one hand, or frustration, and then just flipping back to the side that you're talking about. So
which is completely normal, and that's important. Where many people are. It's completely normal, and it must be integrated. That's why the New Age have a bad name, because a lot of people do not integrate these emotions. They transcend them.
Yeah.
They must be integrated. It's like I've actually spoken to other healers who will say to their clients, "Oh, don't feel fear. Let's just go into meditation. Nice deep breathing. Raise your heart. There you go. The fear's gone." No. That's not going to work. That person's going to have a crash down in 3 days because she hasn't integrated her fear. What you need to do is say, you know what, I feel fear. That's why you acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And you are right to feel anger, fear. You are right to be horrified. Of course you are. But if you stay in that energy, you're no good to anyone. So you must integrate it.
Yeah, that's good advice.
That's the Indigo Revolution. That's why we're in the deluge. And the deluge will stop when we are at critical mass for integration.
Which may not be 50% or anything. It may just be a small percentage. Who knows what that is? No, it doesn't have to be
50%.
I don't know what the percentage is. I must 50. Say it isn't about the amount of people, actually.
Exactly,
it's about
the energy, right? Yeah.
Of it, but we're not really anywhere near critical mass for integration when you look at the truther community along with the light worker community. So the light workers but then a lot of the light workers need to come back down. Like I said, some of them have flitted off to, you know, the new Earth on their unicorn, and they're like, I don't care what you lot are doing, I'm off.
Yeah.
And we need them to come back and help us.
Yeah.
You know.
So they should, on that note, should the light workers and the indigos, should they be teaming up with like some of the religious sides as well? Because I actually heard an interesting take on the second coming of Jesus having more to do with that integration than anything else.
We need to team up with every single person who is not Cabal. That's who we need to team up with. That's what we need to do.
Yeah,
I think Graham's
and we
Cabal.
can. We have ultimate power when all those groups, regardless of, they can still be Christians, they can still be Buddhists and Hindus, New Age, whatever, or atheists. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah.
We are a united team, every single one of us.
Yeah, yeah.
The Cabal have hijacked this reality at every level.
Yeah.
And we must team up.
Yeah. Wow.
There you have it.
Wow, that's awesome. That's probably a good spot to probably wrap it up.
Yeah, I think that's about as good as any. We're coming up on
I'll get
time.
off my soapbox now.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, I really appreciate it. Makes sense to me. Do you have anything? I mean, I'll put your website in the show notes, and I think you've kind of talked about where most of your work is. There's all tons of YouTube stuff. Your books are there. Your website's there. Is there anything else we're forgetting?
Well, only to say thank you so much. I absolutely appreciate these opportunities to speak. I just also like to say to anyone listening that please don't be upset if I can't respond to you personally. I'm getting tons and tons of messages right now, and I'm absolutely spending a lot of time, speaking to people, and I want to be there for everyone. But obviously, there's not enough hours in the day. So just to say, I love you all. We are a team. We are unified, regardless of what your beliefs are. And we will do this. I've seen it. I can see, and many can see, the reality where the Cabal are, to be honest with you, they are so changed from how they were. I mean, things are looking good, really. It might not look that way on the third dimension, but they do not have the power that they had. We already have a positively polarized energetic system.
Yeah.
So we're doing really well. So I would say, I love you all and keep up the good work.
Awesome. That's a great way to finish it off.
Bingo bango.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Good chatting with you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much, guys.
Okay, take care. Okay.
You too.
Okay,
bye.
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 And that was our chat with Magenta Pixie. What do you think, buddy?
I think that was good, man. I thought it might be a little bit more new agey, and I liked how we have another great listener recommendation. We have Jane Shin on the line. She's been teaching and practicing Eastern shamanic traditions, specializing in cleansing and detox, as well as Amazonian medicine of Kambo. And she's a certified Vedic astrologer, yoga and Tai Chi teacher. Been looking forward to doing a show like this for a while. Maybe I need some inspiration to get back into my yoga practice. So this is probably a good way to go. So welcome to the show, Jane. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Yeah, I love it when like listeners recommend guests, and then I start looking into the work, and like you're usually very passionate about like you guys got to get Jane on the show, and then I start looking into it, and it's like just fantastic, and so many of them work out really good, and so it's good to talk to you about all this stuff.
Yeah, it's really cool to have a platform, to talk about this stuff, and you can just tell the world is very much changing at a very rapid rate. The fact that we're doing this, even as a teacher of yoga or sharing the teachings of yoga, I remember 10 years ago, just like imagining or visualizing like a really scrawny Indian guru with loincloth on, practicing some kind of, levitation. This was my visual picture of yoga, even like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
20, and just the huge shift we've made as a culture, really integrating it, although interesting ways that we've integrated it, of course, but
yeah, it's changed so much, and now meditation is where yoga was 20 years ago, where it's so, there's groups of people meditating all over the place. Like when I was looking for groups to meditate with like 5 years ago, it was a little uncomfortable. It was a bit weird. Now it's just people are gravitating towards it. It's really changing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Even I gave a workshop last week, and it was out of my normal setting. I have been giving workshops a lot more in the yoga studio setting. It was the first time I was invited to do it in like a fitness facility.
Oh, yeah.
Where they yoga, or excuse me, where they had meditation, yogic meditation. So I was like blown away. And it was also in the middle of Beverly Hills, mind you. So I was like, what? This is really interesting to be here, and like, why am I invited here to this place? But it really went well. And what I've noticed too is what I've been sharing lately is that people are so much more interested now in a lot of the more esoteric parts of metaphysical science, which is quite intriguing to me. As a practitioner, as someone who studies this field and area, it just creates a lot more opportunities to share what we're passionate about. Even though, maybe 5-10 years ago, we're like, oh, this is a strange topic. This is not something we really talk about. So I've been really excited tuning into your show and hearing your conversation with Jamie Janover.
Yeah, I knew you were going to mention that.
That's so freaking cool, man.
Yeah, he's awesome, and all that Nassim Harriman work, and like you said, the people opening up to that kind of thing now, it's incredible. We saw his lecture the next day; it was 4 hours long. His lecture.
Oh, this was Nassim Harriman's lecture.
No, Jamie's on Nassim's work. So.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, it's been interesting too, because for a long time in the last 10 years, a lot of my work has been integrating a lot of the scientific findings into the esoteric teachings, mainly because we live in a very cerebral culture where it almost seems like the public is requesting / demanding scientific backing, data, information to kind of, very much cerebrally analyze the information that we're getting, and even in the spirit, the world of spirit and the world of metaphysics. So it's really interesting to be in a time frame right now in human culture where we can ask these questions, and at the same time, what is available is scientific data and information. And so I feel like that's kind of where at least my work is going at this time.
That's great.
Is explaining, is using like the works of Nassim Harriman and being able to explain the esoteric sciences through that language, So it's been like a way to introduce these more esoteric sciences to a public who's very skeptical, which is totally understandable, and being like, okay, well, there's also scientific evidence for this.
Yeah. it's understandable, but it's frustrating at the same time because it's not, you know, I keep thinking we shouldn't need all this evidence, you know, we shouldn't have to, but we've been sort of shoved down our throat that we're in a materialistic paradigm, and you know, unless you can measure it, it's not true, and we're still in control by the skeptical paradigm, the skeptical community. So, you know, it's in some levels it's frustrating, but I do agree with you 100% that the science is now there, whether it's like measuring gratitude in a person or measuring all these different things spiritually as well. It's so I love the fact that you're going down that path. I mean, I think it's important. We even have Brody in the studio here who is kind of new. He's been with us for a couple months helping us out with the video aspect and all that, and he's interested in all the stuff we're talking about, but he's, you know, it's not like he's been interested for years, but he's listening to all our guests and saying, well, it really makes sense, and they love what they're talking about, but sometimes it's hard to measure scientifically. So he's probably one of these guys that would, you know, benefit from hearing some of the stuff you got to say about where science and spirituality intersect.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think you know, it's kind of hard to say like where to start, because some people are more of a they're very tuned in materially, and others of us are tuned in more spiritually. And if we look at that, not so much as like a fragmented or fractured way of being, but, well, I mean, you can see it that way, but also just like the yin and yang of a complete psyche or a complete consciousness or a complete way of being and understanding and knowing, then we can just start with wherever we are, no matter who we are, whether it be more cerebral, whether it be more materialistic or spiritual, and just go from there and like bridge the gap in either approach. So what I've been introducing quite a bit is actually interesting, because more and more I'm finding that so many people are not knowing of a lot of things about cosmology, about the world we live in, and like astronomically what is going on in the universe. So it's really interesting to hear, for instance, the work of Nassim Haramein, where they're approaching it from the scientific and astronomical data community, scientific community. And I almost feel that with this information coming to awareness in as a mass culture, like the scientific community, this is something that he published to the larger scientific community. What was it, like 10 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I almost feel as though the metaphysical community has the opportunity now to kind of catch up in a sense, because it almost feels like, because we didn't have a cerebral way of understanding like the metaphysical teachings and what we are experiencing and what we like connected through feeling, it almost feels as though there was still that bridge to be gapped, or gap to be bridged. And so what I'm noticing now is that instead of like approaching spirituality or metaphysics without a roadmap, with the scientific data available, we can start to like understand, okay, now what do the spiritual teachings say, and how can we implement that and physically understand that in our material world. So as an example, if we understand that within the cosmic ether, the vacuum, the space, the void, we have a material, physical experience of this kind of reality we call the third dimension, or the physical dimension. And in the physical dimension, we have, well, everything is made up of, let's say, the four elements that exist in this ether, those being air, fire, water, and earth. We can understand, okay, well, these are the things that exist in nature, in our nature, and the way we experience things in this physical dimension. Then everything that makes up this dimension is made up of these four elements. And through the work of, let's say, Nassim Haramein, we can, it's scientifically talked about how everything is a relation of everything else, everything is interconnected. So if we can see that everything in this dimension is made up of those four elements, then we are all unique compositions of those exact four elements, right? Then not only is it something that is manifested in our physical form, but it's also manifested in our emotional or mental body, subtle body. And those in turn are connected to something greater, something more expansive. And what I really has helped me integrate, okay, something as simple as the element theory, for instance. And this is what has been expressed a lot of times in the Western culture as well, in ancient Western teachings. But what I talk about is more sourced through the Vedic culture, where yoga comes from. And what's interesting is that once we start to understand that those 4 elements are what make up everything, then we also understand that those 4 elements make up the way that we connect to our world. So the way that that translates, for instance, is air is connected to our intellect. Fire is connected to our mental focus. Water is connected to our emotion and our connections and our feeling sense. And then earth is our capacity to manifest and create. So in every human being, we can understand that there are these 4 like motivations that are within us. And when we start to look into our yoga practice a little bit more deeply, beyond the physical, beyond the fitness aspect, getting strong, because that too is important, we can also understand that, you know what? As a human being, I actually have an intellectual need. Like, I have to be able to intellectualize spirituality. And, you know, so for instance, when we come from our cultural paradigm in the West, we're like, or at least things are changing, of course, but a big theme of that ideology and that belief system when I was growing up was, oh, don't question the faith, you know?
Yeah.
Is not to be questioned. Whatever is in the Bible is law. And so whoever interpret this information, we are to, this is of course how I experienced it, is then we take that information, no questions asked. I must be this kind of like slave to this information. You know, I must be like robotically obedient to this information. Whereas if we understand, okay, well, I'm also made up of the air element. So in which case, there is an intellectual need within myself. And so within our entire culture, to cerebrally connect also to that which we believe. So there's that aspect, you know. And then with the fire element, there is also a need within every human being to want to transform, like fire transforms. There's also a need for us to be passionate, and for us to be inspired and get excited about things, right? And so going on with this idea is like there are so many aspects of the human being that wants to be expressed, expanded, evolved, and then understood. You know, if we can understand that as a culture, then we can like, okay, I can start to see, for instance, why there is so much discontent in a culture like the United States. If the educational system is in the state it is, and we're not coming to a place where we are evolving to a place, let's say, to a place where I'm allowed to evolve, or I feel like I'm allowed to evolve, and I can ask questions about anything.
Yeah.
You know? Just like I sent you in that email, you know, metaphysics is really like that space where we can put up all questions, even if I don't feel like I personally can present a response. You know, I'm still going to ask the question.
Yeah.
So this is the opportunity that metaphysics, this field, can open to us. And really, it's just a name for like that which we cannot name. So, you know, it's an interesting place to be. I don't want to get too into like talking about all the elements unless we want to go in that direction, but more just introducing it as a idea, you know, because I can nerd out on this for hours just talking about the elements, for instance. But I think that I wanted to kind of get back to some of the information that I was introducing in my workshops, and noticing that how much I can connect with people, and I have been connecting with people, just introducing and talking about like where this all comes from, you know. And for instance, just being a little bit more concrete with some of the information that I've introduced. some of the symbols, for instance, in ancient cultures, we're like, what does that mean? Like, how do we know that? You know, what does that even signify, and how is it important to me? And then if we can connect it to science and what's happening astronomically or in natural phenomenon, then we start to make that big connection. Okay?
Like,
so as an example,
like the flower of life.
Yes, precisely, absolutely. Or even like those, like they have these new like pine cone. You know what those are? The pine cone.
The pineal, like the pineal gland.
Yeah, the pineal gland. That's so cool, right?
Yeah.
So another example of that we see commonly, let's say in the quote unquote spiritual communities, is like the mala beads.
Yeah.
108 beads, and that's used in so many cultures. I was exposed to it first in Buddhism, and they use it also in a lot of the Taoist esoteric practices. We of course see that in Hinduism, the Vedic culture, and I wonder if that's also the amount of beads that you'd find on like a rosary. I don't know. I haven't really checked that one out. But interestingly, so the number 108, we kind of throw that out as the cosmic frequency of the universe, at least as we know it. But in my studies of the Vedic astrology and the Vedic culture, it actually is the number that signifies the sacred frequency that allowed for human life to exist on this planet. And it actually explains the evolutionary process of the beginning of our cosmos. Beginning of our solar system. So the way that it describes that is, if we understand the beginning of this universe is often called the Big Bang. Right? In the Vedic culture, we call it the Shabda Brahman, the Om. Om is that sound vibration that started on this universe. And again, that also helps us to understand a different connection with Om. It's the first vibrational frequency, and this is how we signify it, is through Om. But if we can picture the beginning of our universe as being all potential energy and all potentiality and matter everywhere even, but it took the universe billions of years, as it is constantly rotating, for the sun, moon, and earth to be in a vibration particular to life being able to exist on this planet. And the way that that is described again is through 108. 108 is actually the distance of the diameter of the sun multiplied by 108. You get the distance of sun and earth.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. 108. So the distance of the sun multiplied by 108 and 8 equals the distance between the sun and the earth. And the same, I'm sure you can imagine, of the moon and the earth. The distance of the moon multiplied by 108 equals the distance of the moon to earth. And it required billions of years of everything rotating through the celestial clockwork for that final frequency to be bang, to happen. And so again, the sacred resonance is 108, because that's when life was finally able to exist here on this planet. And you know, my theory is that it has to do with the Cambrian explosion, which happened about 500 million years ago. And that's when things really started turning on this planet, and it's almost like the industrial revolution of life on Earth. So at least that's how I see it. That's not proven. I haven't done the work enough to find that, but I have reason to believe that that's kind of when things got started. But even things like that, I feel like, help us to connect more deeply to the ancient teachings. It's like, how the heck did they know that thousands of years ago without the advanced technology that is known now to modern man? Interestingly, for us in humanity, within the last 100 years, or is it just over 100 years, we're like, oh my God, we just discovered the speed of light, right?
Yeah.
But actually, the speed of light was already known to humanity 15 to 20,000 years ago. You know, it's just that it's now known using the apparatus and the technology that we have. And I think what's really cool about, like, this, our humanity evolving spiritually is that, I mean, I see it as a paradigm shift within my own psyche, is I would look at that and be like, oh my God, the people of, let's say, the Vedic culture, they knew that thousands of years ago. But with this big shift happening within myself and in other people, now I see it so differently. It's like, we knew that thousands of years ago. We as a humanity knew that thousands of years ago. And like the more we connect intuitively, like you're talking about through meditation, like the more we can start to access that information and like really feel it within ourselves. When I'm, for instance, teaching a physical yoga class, you know, it's nice when I remind the students, because I'm just reminding myself really is what's happening. It's like reminding ourselves that what we're actually tuning into right now through the physical body is this ancient technology, billions of years old. Our conscious knowing, our intellect is only as old as we are. But this physical body, whew, is billions of years old in technology. And I often think that we forget about that, because I know I do. Like, oh my gosh, I look at my body, I'm like, oh God, you're so tired. It sucks. I'm going through all this. And I'm like, injuries and all these things. And we get down upon these things. But really, man, this is ancient technology. And once we start to realize the potential of the human life, including the physical form, and especially when we get into esoteric practices like, you know, qigong, energy work, when we start to take our physical yoga practice into a different aspect, when we start to tune into chakra work, for instance, it starts to like get into some strange, weird places, right? Weird in the original sense of the word.
Yeah, totally.
And you're like, whoa, life is a lot bigger, a lot more expansive than what I thought. And I think for where I see my work going is talking to people and really connecting with people, again, because when I speak to people, it's just reminding myself, like, we're not crazy. It is really that expansive. And what really struck me when I was watching the lecture that Nassim Haramein was giving in the presentation of his work, he's talking about the ancient symbol, the six-sided Star of David, two interlocking equilateral triangles, one pointing upward and one pointing downward within the circle that represents the finite. I look at it as the space where we're going to observe infinity, right? And when we look at the equilateral triangle pointing upward, it's that connection of all that is, you know, at least through the physical eyes and the way that I experience it, like everything above me, outside of me. And then when we see the equilateral triangle pointing downward, that's, everything that is infinite within myself, you know? And after watching, let's say, like the second one of his lectures, I was like, oh my God, there's a black hole within me. You know, we often forget that. The inward journey goes on forever, you know? And I feel like in my experience with working with and being a part of this culture, we are scared to death of the unknown. I mean, so are we all, right? But we are so fearful of the unknown as a culture that we put boxes around our life, right? We like to buttress our identities by the accolades that we've achieved, the titles that we have gained for ourselves, right? All of our achievements and our awards and our titles. And I see this as an inability, or I should say a challenge to being able to go inward. You know,
yeah.
Our identities are so, again, buttressed by all of our stuff. And so when I, for instance, guide a meditation class, it is interesting when we start by the practice of first connecting to all of the roles, the names, the obligations, the duties we give to ourselves. And we look at the external identity that we are connected to. Right? I am Jane. I am a teacher of metaphysics. I am an Asian American. You know, all of these names. And at the same time, the challenge is to see beyond those names and forms. Like, okay, what am I if I'm not Jane? What am I if I'm not a woman? What am I if I am not an Asian or an American or Californian? All these names and titles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we take a moment to kind of investigate the inner nature, and I think that that's a lot of like where we're getting to in America, at least, is starting to understand or starting to question, like, what is the character of not only myself, but what is the character of America?
Interesting. So
Yeah.
that 108 thing is pretty uncanny, really. You know, I go both back and forth on whether, you know, it could have implications in that electrical, where a size ratio like that, or it always kind of steers me back to it all being a simulation, though. You know, is it a billion years of evolution, or is it like a couple hours of real good programming?
Right. And you know what? Interestingly, like what I've seen, it's like, because I've gone through that, or I still do, that rabbit hole of, well, what does it all mean? It really doesn't matter.
I guess at the end of the day, it probably doesn't.
Well, it's like the one unanswerable question is like, why? Why is this all happening? Like, I don't know. And at the same time, what we can see now is like what is happening, or at least to some extent, like what's going on. Yeah, the 108 thing is really interesting, and but the same thing with a lot of these like investigation of numerology and things like that really help us to see that everything is this kind of like pattern, or maybe it can be a simulation. You know, for sure, absolutely. And at the same time, like there's then the question that comes up, which is like, okay, well, is it this determinism, or do we have free will? That always seems to come up. And in my experience and in my studies, it's just like, they're actually one and the same. You know, we experience things as choice. But if we start to see ourselves connected to the source of all things, and we are an expression and a reflection of all things happening, then my making a choice is like that would be happening through me. You know, I think we have this this ego identity, like I am Jane, I'm making choices. I think like Nassim Haramein, he makes a really good one. If we're all like creating our own reality, then we would all be very lonely because we would never meet, right? I thought it was a great thing, great point to make, because it's true. Because instead, if we start to see the interconnectedness and that we are actually co-creating, then the reality that I contribute to is definitely affected by what I do, but I don't change like things by like my command and will, the way that we kind of see this God figure back in the Middle Ages, right? It's like, I want this and it's going to happen. Boosh, everything happens by that stroke of, desire. But when we see that we're actually co-creating this reality, then I can acknowledge that I'm actually contributing to the reality I live in. And it takes all of us, right? But at the same time, I acknowledge my power in this moment. Like the fact that I'm even here talking to you about these findings, these teachings, these practices is like, whoa, I'm acknowledging where I am, but at the same time, like where we all are, to be here, like receiving this information, to be co-creating this information. I mean, the three of us, for instance, the four of us. So, yeah, it's just a shift in paradigm, a shift in the way we see.
Is that what your workshops have been about then? That you're doing now? Like, can you explain a little bit more about the actual workshop?
The workshops, I've been titling them something along the lines, because they kind of all have different titles, is Aligning to Cosmic Abundance. And what I talk about generally is, again, introducing the like cosmology of our solar system, and I'll talk about them using, you know, modern science, as well as the stories that have been given through the Vedic culture, the Taoist culture, as well as I actually use Genesis quite a bit. Yeah, for instance, like an example of it would be from, like, if we drew that circle, infinity drawn into a circle is, okay, that's the part of infinity that I'm going to investigate. So from there, as I look at it as like the big zero, we have all infinite potential. And in the Vedic culture, we would say this is the Shiva, the energy of all potentiality right here. But nothing is happening until within it, there is this force, we call it Shakti, right? The energy, the swirling that actually gave movement to the void, within the void. So the way that I look at this is the Shakti, the energy is gravity. Without gravity, nothing is happening within the void in this little snippet that we are investigating. So if we look at that in the form of, let's say, Genesis, you have the story of Adam and Eve. You have this in many, many cultures. You have Adam, who is there as a singular being representing all of humanity, but in its potential, with no duality. It is just it within himself. So they use the story of, oh, from his rib came Eve. So from within the entity itself comes this other potential, the potential of otherness, creating duality. And from that duality, now we have the potential for progeny. We have this ability for it to be created into something else. From singularity comes otherness. So in the Taoist cosmology, I love how the Taoists put it. They say from one came two, right? So the same story is residing, but I think that because we don't, at least in the Judeo-Christian ethic, for a long time at least, like we look at these stories, and because of our maybe non-connectedness to like energy, because we saw something so much as like material, we took it very literal, didn't we? And so we used it as a way of understanding like the difference between man and woman. But if we think of it more so as the energy of the masculine and the energy of the feminine, and what that all means, you know, and how they interact. So I talk about like the beginnings of the universe and how energy interacts with each other. And specifically, I take this into, generally at least, into a discussion of Vedic astrology and what it is and how it's different from our Western astrology. I think Vedic astrology has this immense potential to help bring a little bit more closeness of the rift of metaphysics and our scientific culture. Yeah. So I'm just going to say this because from my experience, I run into so many people that don't know this information. So as an example, when you look at the Sunday Times horoscope, right? We've done this for many years. We look in the Sunday Times horoscope and we look at those dates and we say, okay, according to these dates, I'm an Aquarius. According to these dates, I am a Sagittarius, etc., etc. So many people don't seem to know what are these dates signifying, right? These dates are signifying where the sun is during a certain time of year, correct?
Yeah.
And some people, again, may be a little unknowing of this information. So yeah, so these are our sun signs, right? What is not known in our culture is that these are the sun signs and the dates nearly 2,000 years ago. So in essence, what is happening is that what the metaphysical community is taking as dates, for instance, is not being reflected in current astronomy. So what I think I am during a certain time of year, the sun is, in Taurus, let's say this time of year, that's where the astronomers are like, okay, yeah, the sun is here, the moon is here, because we're using the same sky. And yet the metaphysical community is using a totally different batch of dates.
Because they haven't taken into account the Earth's, what do you call it when it rotates in its
precession?
Precession?
Yes, precisely.
Okay.
So not only are they not taking account into precession, but what I find to be very impactful on our perspective and our psyche is the fact that even if we're not taking this precession into account, what we're saying as a culture is that every year around at the time of the solstices and equinoxes, the Earth is in relation to the background of stars in exactly the same way every year. But in terms of like physical phenomenon, that's impossible. There's no way that we're living a perpetual Groundhog's Year every year.
Okay.
Like we're coming back to the same place at this, let's say, spring equinox, because that's where it was first charted, right?
And that's where we're coming up on.
Yeah. So we're coming.
Wait,
sorry.
We're coming up on solstice.
Sorry.
So
I feel like it was just winter like last month. So
it's true. It's true because we're experiencing time at a faster rate, right?
Yeah.
we are. But to say as a culture, like as a mass culture, this is what we're thinking. Like every time the spring equinox comes around, we're going to be in the exact same relation to the background of stars as we were the moment it was charted, in this instance being around second century. So what I interpret is, as a scientific community at large, we're looking at the metaphysical community being like, oh my God, these fools. Like they're whack. They're totally not on par. So what that creates is a dissonance between different aspects of our culture. So the scientific culture, the scientific community within our culture is saying one thing, and the metaphysical community is not using the data collected by the scientific community and then interpreting the energetics of that to our culture, which is which is how I see the potential of our relationship together, like the metaphysical community and the scientific community. It's like, okay, this is what we see. This is the data we collect about the astronomical phenomenon in this current moment. And then the potential is the metaphysical community can take that information and be like, okay, now this is what it means, and this is how that is being experienced in the day-to-day, right? Yeah. So that is a potential of what can be presented as a culture. Interestingly, like we're coming around, and I feel like for the longest time in mass, our culture is just so unknowing that that's what was even going on. Yeah. And we didn't really have an understanding that there was a rift, that what we're looking at in the sky and what we're reading in the, New York Times horoscope is not the same.
What is the main difference there then? Because we went through this transition here because I always thought that that it was exactly the same. We had a bunch of guests on a couple of years ago that were talking about the precession and the equinox.
They added a sign too, didn't they, or something?
Well, and I realized it's a big stretch. Like it's not just it happens on the same day, the same time every year. Like it varies from a 4 or 5 day period or something like that. So what?
Oh, you're talking about the solstices?
Yeah, like so is that the similar thing that you're talking about? So how does like where the sun is in the sky every year and not being the same? How does that? It
varies on the 4 year, right? So leap years are 4.
Well, the rate of precession is actually closer to 26,000 years.
Right. Okay. The great year. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah. So the actual cycle of precession is huge.
Yeah.
We're not going to live that in our lifetime. However, even in 1 year, I think it transitions or it moves 50 seconds or so. So even from one year to another, it's not going to make a huge change. But 2,000 years is going to make a big difference.
Right, I see what you mean. Okay, so it's different than what I was thinking about the solstice and the equinox. I'm thinking about something different. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to square that away in my head. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, it's interesting too because the Gregorian calendar is, I don't know, is pretty arbitrary. You know, it's set to a certain standard that is set by government, set by government, but it really has no sensitivity to energetics, right? So when the equinoxes and solstices happen, it's on a certain day. Like for instance, this year was around the spring equinox was around March 20th, 21st or so. But it's not like, it's going to be March 20th or 21st is a pretty it's not like 1/1, for instance, like the beginning of the year, which it really signifies for energetics. Like when it is the spring equinox, it's the birth of the new sun. Well, actually, that's not true. But it's so in the light of how much sunlight is reaching Earth is starting to become more expansive, right? Starting to grow. Yeah. So it starts that growing process. So we can say that is the beginning, right? But for people living under the Gregorian calendar, 1/1 is just, okay, that's the new year. Why? Because I said so.
Yeah, the new year should be December 21st.
Yes, December 21st is actually the birth of the new sun. And that's why I corrected myself. Spring equinox is not the birth of the new sun.
Right.
But being on this arbitrary calendar, we start to, on a daily basis, become more disconnected with the energies that are and what we are surrounded by energetically. So in the workshops, it helps us to get more acclimated with the energies that are. So again, aligning to cosmic abundance really just means aligning to what is. And this may be outside of like our own understandings. Okay, January 1st is the new year. So we begin new resolutions and all of this. As an example, January 1st this year happened on the full moon, right? So the day after, which would be January 2nd, would start the waning phase of the moon, right? The light of the moon is growing smaller. So this is actually a time when we want to bring closure to things. But because of the arbitrariness of our Gregorian calendar system, well, we're going to start something new right now. Yeah. So it's not in alignment. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is giving an example of, okay, yes, my Gregorian calendar and my my cerebral connection to dates is telling me I should start something new, but man, I'm having a really hard time bringing forth a feeling of increase, starting something new. And at the same time, like I'm actually not being energetically supported in that direction. So interestingly, when we become more aligned to the energetics around us, if we can, for instance, just get on the lunar cycles, like when the lunar cycle is waxing, this is a great time to start something new. When you want to buy a new house, when you start new projects, go into business, doing something like, I want to go get it, starting, even like, for instance, cutting your hair. Whereas during the waning phase, this is when we want to like be reflective. This is a time when we want to bring closure. We want to, let's say, like pack up our house and prepare for the move in the next coming phase. When we start to be a little more understanding of the energies involved and exist throughout our lives, then we can actually be supported with these energies when we start new projects, or even when we get into like more challenging situations. Maybe I want to go into litigation. I want to be supported by energies as much as possible when I start these projects. And by doing so, I feel that we start to feel more connected, like we're not alone, that we're actually like doing things together. And that means even connected to the ether itself, not necessarily just to people, you know?
Yeah. So is that how Vedic astrology sort of squares that whole thing then? It's based on the actual cosmology?
It is based on current astronomical phenomenon, yes.
Right.
So if I were to go to, let's say, Joshua Tree and totally surrounded by, you know, the heavens, and I can see a lot of stars, and I'm looking at the moon. Let's say it's waning right now. It's getting smaller, and let's say it's hanging between two stars known as Castor and Pollux, right? We know these as the Gemini twins. Like, oh, the moon is in Gemini. I'm looking at it right now. And then, for whatever reason, the Western astrologers are like, well, actually, the moon is in Cancer. I'm like, are you freaking joking? I'm looking at it right now. So this is actually like what I was going through when I first started studying Vedic astrology. Is like, it was pulling my hair out. I was just like, what is going on? And so I just know through my own experience how much of this has helped me shift my own paradigm into being more connected with what is.
Right.
Going beyond what I've been told, going beyond the pre-existing structures. And that has been like the tremendous like change on the psychic level that has helped me to bring about changes on the externals. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Did that change also correspond with your learning Qigong and Tai Chi, stuff like that? Because I wonder how much that has to do with shifting as well, like starting to get into the energy work.
That for sure. Especially the Qigong and Tai Chi. Because it is at the root of it, the art of slowing down, the art of listening, and the art of gentleness, which for myself as an American, representing at least a small part of our collective consciousness, I was very aggressive. I didn't even realize it. Super aggressive growing up, super aggressive especially in my adolescence, and then in my 20s, I was just like, wow, so much aggression, so much angst, frustration, that didn't even realize it needed to be channeled, you know? And my study and practice of these arts have one, helped me to understand that I was lacking a lot of grace, a lot of gentleness, a lot of softness. And what's really cool about, let's say, Tai Chi, for instance, is like the more you push, the more you are aggressive, and the more you like fight against anything, the more you make yourself vulnerable. You know?
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's like the more I'm like, and I like give this kind of crazy aggressive energy, the harder I fall.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to come to experience, because being in this martial art form or in this study, you're like, whoa, you experience it in your body, these concepts that are just, you know, theoretical. So, and the idea of it being like, soft overcomes hard. Like, oh yeah, sure. That takes so many years of practice, mainly because it's so rooted in the thick noggin. Like, no, actually, I have to use an iron fist to get the things that I want. You know, and I started to, no, seriously, it's like I started to notice how much of my own way of being was a collection of my own social programming from being an American.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, the industrial war complex. It's like I can only get things if I manipulate, if I am competitive, if I grab, if I take it when I see it, you know? This is the mentality that I realized I had so much of because I saw the other of it.
Would you say that's the Western world altogether, or America? Are you sort of specifically, you know, like, I mean, would you say Canada, same thing, like Europe, or is it the Western thing in general, or more so in America even?
I think that I say America because, like, I live here and I'm very much like, well, at least in my bubble in California right now,
Yeah.
Like I can speak for that. But at the same time, there is an inner knowing that this is very much pervasive in our Western mentality, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, too, like where are the lines really blurring and where are the lines distinct? Because even in the East, a lot of this mentality has already been very much integrated.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So at the same time, can we say Eastern thought anymore?
Yeah.
Really. And I guess what we're talking about is the ancient Eastern teachings, right? But at the same time, you mentioned the beginning of this podcast, my work with shamanic medicines.
Oh,
and
yeah, right.
the medicines that I have been working with have been a lot more so in South America. So South America being in the West, but man, they're really progressive, you know?
Yeah.
They're really connected. So everything at the same time is being blurred, you know? North and South integrating is also a really cool concept for us here in America, because when we start to learn from our brothers in the South, wow, it's very tremendous what these medicines can bring and the connection that we can start to cultivate and develop even to Mother Earth.
Yeah, if you go back even further, then it becomes global. I mean, before the Ice Age, I mean, there's
Right.
megalithic sites all over the place. And I mean, Nassim's work was talking about that with Jamie as well. Like, we're going to find out soon enough that, I mean, we're going to be, using global traditions, ancient global traditions from way back.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
That's so true.
I mean, I've got this thing in my head about Central America, and if you take away the 300 feet, 400 feet of water that happened after the Ice Age, I mean, what is down there, right? What is down there in the middle of Central America? It'd be amazing to see, what cultures were there before the Ice Age. So I wanted to ask you a bit more about the Kambo and the work you do with that as well, and then also get into like how this practice can help people out. Like I've been out of my yoga practice now for a few months, but for a while there, it was really powerful for me. And I mean, I definitely got to get back into it, but we wanted to have somebody on to talk about yoga and the power and how that mindfulness and I mean, there's so many benefits to it. I mean, it would be nice to get into like, how that helps people, all the stuff you're doing and how that like awareness and that stuff helps people as well.
Absolutely. That's thank you. I almost feel like little self-conscious because I noticed myself kind of going here and there in our conversation. And I think that has a lot to do with right now my work being in so many different areas.
Yeah. Well, it's all good though. It's perfect.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I almost feel like that's kind of where we are, where I am. We're trying to take and integrate so much, right? And so it is very nice to have a practice to be able to do that with, because otherwise we just go crazy thinking about the tens and thousands of different topics that are out there.
Yeah.
So my work with these medicines has been truly transformative. So I started working with the medicine of Kambo, which is the venom of a poisonous tree frog. I work specifically with a medicine from the South American Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
This medicine allows the human energetic system a reboot in terms of its immune functions, its lymphatic system. And that's what we can see on the physical level. We also are allowed at least momentary times of like superhuman strength.
Wow.
Like froggy powers for a little bit. I don't know if you guys have worked with any of these medicines at all.
Well, we've learned about them, but I personally just like normal psychedelics, none of the ayahuasca or Kambo type stuff. But I mean, we have learned a little bit about it. I'm interested in why people are doing that, whether it's from, addiction, healing from addiction, that type of stuff, or other traumatic PTSD type things. I mean, it'd be interesting to know how this is helping people.
So the Kambo I actually started working with after some time working in the addiction addiction recovery field.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which was like super jarring an experience because I realized like, oh, at least for me, this is not the way.
Yeah.
And I was teaching there for some time and realizing that, again, just in my viewpoint, that it was kind of like a sinking ship, this recovery, addiction recovery field. And I couldn't really contribute much to help in the framework.
Yeah.
The framework.
It's a losing battle, really. I mean,
yeah.
So you mean in general it's a sinking ship, like just with all the stigma and the programs that are around it, like we're not really getting anywhere with that, or?
Well, I mean, just in the area that I was working and the exposure that I had to the system,
yeah,
it almost felt like it didn't really make sense that you would help addiction, like people recover from addiction by prescribing more pharmaceutical medications, you know, which is what I see a great deal of.
Wow, yeah.
You know, I just see so many people affected by pharmaceutical medications, and at the same time, like okay, sure, it's better than, let's say, to a certain degree, what they had been ailing from previously, but it's still not really
the solution.
Yeah, it just was not a long-term solution. Yeah, and yeah, just a lot of, I almost feel like the whole system of like treating someone as an addict, creating more division, and then also the person who is suffering from addiction, making this very definitive connection to being an addict was almost even more harmful.
Right.
You know?
Okay.
So, yeah, so there's that. And then, so I got into working with Kambo for just looking for other alternatives. And personally, I was not working with addiction at the time for myself, although that has been part of my past experience.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've noticed too in sitting with Kambo and working with Kambo is, yeah, many people with addiction issues do come for support. And Kambo has the ability to, again, help reset the immune system. And oftentimes, like what you kind of need for pushing through a tough spot is just that like added boost, a little support, like physically. Sometimes when you're feeling like terrible, it's hard to get over your mental humps, for instance, right? But not only that, it helps a person to become more attuned with their intuition.
Huh.
I think, at least in my research, there's a great deal of talk about the physical benefits of working with Kambo. But for me, what has been just huge was a deeper connection being made with my intuition. Also, it allows, if a person makes room for it, it allows one to have a quieter, stiller mind. And through that, I noticed how busy the mental chatter really was. And it helps for us to locate and identify really the different voices that are in our head and all of the back and forth that we go through when, for instance, making a decision or confronted with an issue. And so we start to see the filter of our mind, what it goes through in order to get to, whatever the end point is going to be. So that's been hugely.
That makes total sense. If it's like a shortcut to powerful mindfulness, then that's huge.
Yeah,
absolutely. If you can get there instead of doing it, mindfulness meditations for 10 years, if you can get there quicker through Kambo, I mean.
Yeah, but the thing is, it doesn't last forever.
Yeah. No, you still have to. Yeah.
I look at it as like, okay, here's some space. Here's just like when you go, let's say, a meditation retreat.
Yeah.
There's a week for you to be in that mindful meditation practice, and a lot of our surroundings are going to help support your work in that, right? So I almost feel that these medicines allow that space,
right?
You to create, whatever changes to shift you in the direction you want to go. there's that opportunity. But I almost feel like it's kind of like the American, or at least the Western mentality to like, okay, where's the pill?
Yeah,
I want the answer.
Totally.
You know? It's like, give me the convenient, 99-cent thing that I got to buy, and then all of my worries will be taken care of. So I think, especially as a practitioner, as a facilitator of Kambo, I notice this a lot. Like, people come in, give me that quick fix.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to be done with this. I want to be over. Well, when we acknowledge ourselves on the spiritual journey, we realize it's over when it's over, right? And I'm constantly in at least cultivating an eternal state of vigilance. And so I meet a lot of people on this path who are like, okay, I want the answer right now. Okay, I'm going to work with ayahuasca one time. It's going to be done.
Yeah.
And so if we have this mentality, then there is definitely this like fall. There is this feeling almost like when you're an addict, like, oh, I have a relapse. I had this 1 month where I was doing so well, and then I relapsed. I fell. It's the same thing with, after I worked with ayahuasca, man, 1 month I was really proactive. I was thinking clearly. I had the best relations, and suddenly I fell. I relapsed. And these medicines can definitely help us through certain humps, give us clarity, give us guidance. But overall, the work is not done. The work is like set here right before us right now, right? Yeah. But we have all these gifts to remind us that we're supported by the universe, by the community, by, ancient humanity to do our work.
So
but the thing is,
keep going.
But the thing is, like, the work is never done, and it's up to us, right?
So what does that look like after a Kambo treatment or session or whatever you call it? What is the aftercare work that you would suggest for people?
Well, there is the opportunity of quietness. I recommend to those partaking to, leave space for listening. If you're tired, sleep. If you have the strength enough to go on a meditative walk, go out in nature. And these are spaces that will be more supportive for listening, for being reflective. But what often happens is, we're in our behavioral patterning is we'll be given this space, and a moment later I'll start to fill the space.
Yeah,
that's what I often see is like we start to fill the space right away. Actually this evening, I'm like, are you serious? We just had Kambo. This evening I have an appointment to do this. Sometimes it's unavoidable, sure, but it's there's this part of our culture being very cerebral. We got to figure things out, right? So the moment I'm given the space, I am filling it with the thoughts of how I can improve my life.
Yeah.
Intuition is being devoid or being clear of all the mental chatter.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it, like these medicines, are very helpful. But we, as America, as Western culture, we're very spiritually malnourished. We don't necessarily see our spiritual roots. And so because of that, we have very little guidance in this area. So when people work with medicine, for instance, they often don't even know what they're seeing, don't know how to integrate what they're seeing. And this oftentimes can lead to so many things, of course, but almost I see a lot of doubting the work of the medicine. Oh, the medicine's not for me, it doesn't work. Well, mainly because they may be lacking guidance for aftercare, as you mentioned. What do you do afterward? People don't, in our culture, in mass, don't really know what to do with space or nothingness. What if you had a day where you didn't have to go to work, you didn't have any plans, you didn't have to do anything, you didn't have errands to run?
Yeah, or instead of thinking that you have to be doing something, your goal is to do nothing. Instead of feeling that that's avoiding stuff or that you're procrastinating, just do nothing as a practice, like for an hour a day or something. Like just don't have anything to do. Don't do anything.
Yeah, and then so foreign to people. That might go into a different topic, of course, is like slave mentality.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to work, slaves.
Yeah, seriously. It's like, what do you have to show for yourself? It's like, what is wrong with you? You know, it's like your worth is built up of all the things that you are able to push out.
Well, did you notice people answer the question, like when you ask somebody how they're doing, their answer is, I'm busy. Like instead of it being good or I'm being well or I'm doing well, it's like, oh, I'm busy. I'm good. Yeah, busy.
Yeah.
Keeping busy.
It's like I'm trying, and I find myself answering that. Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm busy. Yeah. Like why is busy even an answer to that question? Busy shouldn't even be in there. It should be, yeah, I'm not busy. I'm actually doing well because I've got nothing to do.
Yeah. Well, you're a slacker.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not contributing anything to this world.
Like since when did busy equal good or well? I mean, it's crazy. Yeah. It should be the opposite.
Yeah, well,
that's right.
You are a very successful robot. Awesome. Good
Yeah,
job.
good for you, man.
Awesome. Yeah.
Robot.
You know? Yeah, it's a strange world we live in, huh?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's crazy, but I do agree. It's opening up, and people are curious now, and they're learning, and it's like work like of yourself, and guys like Nassim Harriman, and us being able to talk about all this stuff, you know, and yeah, like just all the connecting of science and spirit. Like, are there more examples of where you could point people to, like where the science is really proving out that there's more to us, like, besides this materialistic paradigm? Like anything else that sort of jumps out at you?
Oh, specific.
I mean, there's all the studies on, you know, meditation and yoga and the benefits of that. I mean, there's all that kind of stuff. Mindfulness, even how it changes your brain, and even just being in a state of gratitude. I mean, there's all that like specific stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Or where do you want to go from here?
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned Qigong and Tai Chi energy work.
Yeah.
I don't know if this actually has connection with that. But I almost feel like I've been teaching very differently these days, because I don't know, it's just the direction that I've been seeing a lot of yoga practitioners go, as we get very caught up in the physical life and movement. But in my exposure to the Chinese shamanism and energy work, I think what can help people in further their physical practice, let's say in yoga or even physical fitness in whatever form you practice it, is bringing into connection, like, again, just the Star of David, the point of the triangle pointing upward and point of it pointing downward, is in your physical body. That too exists, to find that balance of an energy, upward lifting energy to extend, expand, and grow, and equally to find an energy that extends and grows equally downward.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've been really finding myself teaching a great deal of is walking and standing, and how the energetics of our body is built up in a certain way that for it to travel and be cultivated in the body, that things have to be open, right? So in our physical practice, we're often, you know, doing this and that and like being in a certain way, but now we can start to tune into how things feel in the body. Well, do you feel open, and do you feel free, and do you feel things are you know, free flowing through your body? So I don't know if that has to do with like scientific findings, but perhaps
no, but that's kind of what I was getting at before with the yoga and helping people out with that. Like that's one of the things I noticed is mindfulness of the body, and actually starting to feel stuff, and then actually starting to be aware of what's going on in your body and feel things, which I never used to do before. Everything was just numb before, and now, you know, you can actually start to feel what's going on, and feel when you're slouching, and feel when you're tense, and when, like, you know, at work I realize I start trying to breathe deep, and I realize like I'm all just in a ball.
You're a little ball right now. You need to be more like a puffer fish.
In a way, yeah. Well, I think it's interesting to see the effects of that. People practicing yoga more and more, or practices of that sort, is that we're starting to tap into this new area, which is like our feeling sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's interesting because we're getting to a point where I see people like, oh, it's almost frustrating when you become more sensitive to how you feel. Because for so long in our culture, it's like we have relegated the feeling sense and diminished the feeling sense. So now that we're feeling so much, yeah, like now that we are feeling so much and we're acknowledging our feelings a lot more, like what do we do with that? You know? And mainly
Bottle 'em
because so much comes out. What is that?
Bottle them up.
No, she's saying, but yeah,
Then you
bottle
get
it
sick.
and sell it.
There you go.
Bottle up and sell it.
Idea.
Oh,
Business idea.
No, I mean, what is the answer? Take responsibility, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
well, yeah. Take responsibility. What do you mean by that?
of our state of being,
Yeah.
you know, of our
Also,
of our feelings. Well, as if because it's up to us, right? If I resent people, if I resent things, if I live in that world of victimhood, then I'm not taking responsibility of how my state of being is, right? I choose how to look at things. I choose my point of view, right?
true. And it's really interesting. My sister, she works more in that field.
Okay.
So I share a lot with people about like our connection to the macro.
Yeah.
She works a lot of on internal work, and she's actually helped me become more attuned to interpreting what it is I feel.
Right.
And she is such a master at it. And yes, taking responsibility for how we feel, but if we come from a cultural background of like not knowing because of lack of exposure, lack of working with, I feel that it is quite helpful to seek guidance, seek support, seek community,
Yeah.
where you can gain better insights and then deal with things like that.
Yeah.
Because honestly, that's the work right there. Inner work, that's that black hole that goes on forever within us.
Yeah.
And really, that's everything, because of the fact that for so long we've been such an externally focused culture.
Yeah.
And so we see this state of disconnect, this state of, I should say, imbalance, because if we're looking at the external world, that's, let's say, the masculine, okay, the divine masculine, which we're all a part of, like how things look, like what I have accomplished, what my titles are, all of these things. But our character, who I am without all of those things, that again is that which is desiring now to be cultivated. And so I find it, for me, I've been so disconnected from my emotions early on in my life that it took me a lot of guidance from others and a lot of vulnerability, which is of the utmost inner strength, of course,
Yeah.
to have to deal with it, right? And I think it has a lot to do with when we start to get more connected to our spiritual root, we can start to ask the more difficult questions. When we, as a culture, again, are spiritually malnourished, what I see that as is that we don't have like this protective or like anchoring line for when I start to plummet into the unknown abyss.
Yeah.
So when we do work with, for instance, like ayahuasca, that medicine will take you somewhere deep. It can, to the most abysmal places of your psyche so that you can shed light on it. This is a potential, right?
Yeah.
But what I've noticed is the people that freak out or cannot integrate what they are seeing are people that generally lack the anchor of like, you know what? I live in a divinely connected universe.
Yeah.
I'm a divine creature. I am sacred. If they don't have that as an anchoring to their own identity and their own selves, how can they, or how can we go into those places and challenge it, all of existence, all pre-existing paradigms? It's a scary place to go down in alone, right?
Yeah.
So that has a lot to do with going back to those the work with shamanic medicines is, as a facilitator, I find and I take responsibility for making sure that whoever I'm working with or supporting are people that have a spiritual background, or not to say like they've experienced, but like I can talk to them and be like, hey, this is, are we clear on this is who you are? Like, do you know that you are a spiritual being and that you are eternally held? And yes or no? And depending on what type of work we're doing, then we can create an assessment of where we're going, right? What kind of work we can do. Hey, I would like to introduce you to my sister. Example, right? This is why we have.
Yeah.
We're all in a different place. And so moving forward with that, with the teachings that I share, has a lot to do with reintroducing the spiritual root, because from there we can start to go into wherever you need to go, because we're all different. So some people are going to work with Kambo, some people are going to work with ayahuasca, some people are going to work with San Pedro, some people are going to work with something entirely different. But wherever it is they're going, wherever as we are going, we have a tether. We don't have to feel like we're going to be completely lost in the sea of the unknown.
Have you had to have difficult discussions with people that come into that Kambo environment and they're either, let's say, major atheists or something, and they're like, no, I want this to prove it to me? Like, they don't come in with that room for a belief system at all, like that?
The people that I've generally been working with are people that are through references or through referrals. So I've
it doesn't happen very often.
Working with people that kind of like undergone like what do you call that? Or like already known to like medicine circles or yoga or someone. I generally don't work with people I don't know or have no reference to.
Yeah.
It's been pretty cool. But at the same time, I meet a lot of these people at my workshops. I have no idea, what any of this is. But I guess if we talk about like the energetics that reside in all human beings, like there is a part of us that is always connected.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so speaking to that, generally we can find like a middle ground or like a place where we can agree upon, and then we just start from there.
Yeah. Do you have any questions, Darren, at all before we start wrapping it up?
No. Well, I guess where our listeners can track you down other than here.
Well, I have my website, okagaya.com.
Can you maybe spell that out for us quick?
Yeah, it's okagaya.com.
Perfect. That's easy, actually.
Okay, good.
I lost it before, sorry.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah. And if anyone has any recommendations of things that I can put up on there, it's pretty maybe skeletal. It doesn't have so much going on yet. But yeah, I would love to hear some feedback about things that I could put up and things that people would find enjoyable or interesting.
Sure. Is most of your work in LA there, in that area?
Oh yeah, mostly in LA.
Yeah. All right.
LA, Orange County.
Yeah. They probably need the most work, so.
Interestingly, because Californians are very open, but at the same time, like, I mean, there's always the polarity, right?
Yeah, totally.
Well, there's a lot of money out here. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
Right
on. Well, it's been a fascinating chat. Thanks for coming on and talking about all that.
I'm gonna start doing yoga. I just started, so.
Did you?
Interesting, yeah.
Really?
You just started yoga practice?
No, I just started doing some yoga here and there.
Like when? Like a couple days ago, or?
No, it's been on and off for a few weeks.
Oh, you've been quiet about it. This is your coming out of the closet with your yoga practice.
Lisa's been getting me into.
Really? Wow,
Oh, that's amazing.
See, he hides this from me now.
Actually, you reminded me, if I could add one thing about speaking to the listeners about like the importance of a yoga practice.
Yeah, for sure.
I think what we mean is like an embodiment practice, right? A time and a space that we create for ourselves to um, not only uh, do some self-care, but to do some self-listening and to do some inner work and inner checking in. Um, I feel that, with all this information and being part of an interesting time for humanity where so many things are possible, it can be very exciting. Um, but we can very easily get lost in the how am I going to do those things that I see and want to create in my life. And the actual practice, let's say yoga practice, Zen practice, Tai Chi practice, any of those things um, help us to realize that the freedom is actually completely inward. An example of this would be there was we see, well, some of us see or know of monks that practice day in and day out, no matter it's Christmas or Easter, practicing day in and day out the same thing every single day. And yet, how is it that through a repetitive external environment and external situation that we create for ourselves, how is it that I am seeking freedom? So then we can see that through this example, at least, the freedom is not an outward thing. Freedom is an inward thing. It's a perspective, it's a connection that we make to the world that we're living in. So in the Western culture, I often see, because I see it in myself, like I'm looking for freedom outside of me. But when we have a yoga practice, and that can include any kind of meditation, physical movement, whatever, is that I realize that being in this moment is actually the only place where I can create freedom or have freedom, because it's the only moment that exists. And really to start to embody that and learn that and really experience it is where it's all at. Because everywhere else is just theory and never comes. And I'm starting to get caught up in the externals. But in our physical inward practice, or whatever that may be, gives us a moment to really notice, like, what is it that is creating consciousness itself? So if we are allowing ourselves to be in that moment, I feel that we can come to this like point where we can ask ourselves, well, if it weren't for me, if it weren't for my eye experience, then none of this would actually exist. It's really in those quiet moments where we can come to those epiphanies, I think.
It all comes back to being in the moment and being present. It's funny how it does, but it does. And that's why I think that yoga is one of those important things, is and mindfulness meditation as well, because the more you practice that, the more during the day you can get into the moment. You can be there. If you don't really practice it, it doesn't happen as easy. Like it just where those moments of the presence will increase, and the gaps of being in the future and the past, those will decrease, hopefully.
Right. And there's also the saying that the way we practice can we be the way we live.
Yeah.
So the way if we practice more habitually, let's say even a daily practice, like 15-20 minutes, even that would be so powerful in just the practice of being here, right? And so the more we carry on with that practice, even if it be a short period of time, it is putting us in the way I practice. I remember when I was able to find that moment of silence, connection, and I'm able to find that more and more in my daily life. And this is really Zen.
And that's inner, and that I would